Okay, welcome to the Perception of Virtual Production. So, my name's Rhys. I am a freelance stage operator, 3D artist, and virtual production technician. I'm going to give a very kind of brief introduction about myself before we dive into the talk, because it is quite important. Here you can see some of the on-set things that I've done. On a whole range of stuff, from working with LED to more recently down in the bottom right you can see a small green screen studio that I'm now a kind of co-director at, which is quite different but really fun. So about me, I hold a Bachelor of Arts with honours from Abertay University in Computer Arts. Abertay is a games university, one of the leading in Europe they claim to be. So thinking I want to work in the games industry, pretty naturally I chose to go here. I specialise in 3D game art, learn things such as like modelling, sculpting, animation, texturing, so on and so forth. But most importantly, while I was here, I developed my understanding of like game engines and how they function, how rendering pipelines work. And after 4 long and hard years of studying games, I decided I wanted nothing to do with the games industry and transitioned into a little thing called virtual production. So this was right around the time of The Mandalorian coming out, so that was the kind of big craze. And you can see my very first virtual production project in my very crowded garage with a green screen and 1 light. So moving on from that, I then went and studied a Masters in 3D Design for Virtual Environments at Glasgow Caledonian. I further developed my 3D and 3D technology skills, looking at things like motion tracking, photo scanning, and 3D printing. And for the first time I had access to an actual studio space, and once again looked towards virtual production, this time building a very quick live composite, pretty rough around the edges, green screen studio. And finally, most importantly, my second Masters in virtual production from the Academy of Live Technology, completed just last year in September. And why the hell have I been mentioning my education for so long? Funnily enough, this project was my master's project. This is what I put a lot of time into, and here you can see the kind of facilities that I had access to where I was learning. And you might recognise Production Park as that image in the bottom right shows off. We had adolescents in for about 6-7 months. The police station set and the psychiatrist's office set were built in Studio 5. So yeah, during my time here, I frequently freelanced with the company Explorer. This is their Volume, which is the one that I learned on. So while I was there, I was learning in a real production environment. So let's hop right into it. So you can see that over the 3 years, being over the 3 courses over the 3 last years of it, I was constantly progressing in virtual production, moving from green screen, using my phone and a green screen, all the way up to an LED volume in just 2.5 years, really. So while I put so much time into this, everything virtual production, it was my life for about 3 years. So it came as a shock to me when I got this text from my mother, where she said, "I'm trying to explain what it is that you do, and I can't. I've got no idea what it actually is other than the big video wall. Can you give me a quick explanation and maybe a photo and video or 2? So this got me thinking, naturally, quite a lot. Why doesn't she know what we do? Why doesn't everyone know what all of us do? And should I be speaking to my mother a bit more? So it gave me my initial research question, which was, plain and simple, what is virtual production? Again, this sounds pretty simple, but one that we will all recognise the answer is incredibly complex. It's very important to all of us, and in my opinion, it's unclear. There is no correct answer. Different studios, different people, all have their own definitions, names for things, and that kind of disparity in the industry poses problems. Like when we're trying to market ourselves. Now as a small business owner, trying to approach clients and explain to them what it is that we actually do is 90% of the battle. When we look at people like potential partners, employees, investors, we need to be able to explain to them what virtual production is. So yeah, heading on to the next one, you can see even just searching for virtual production, it's all the same stuff that pops up. I was finding a lot of information on LED walls and ICVFX workflows. Even conversations I was having with peers and colleagues would hold that same bias. Everyone would talk about LED walls. But for the last 3 years, I'd been working with virtual production and I hadn't touched an LED wall once. So I had to find a slightly more complex and different research question. So it kind of advanced into how does the public's perception of virtual production differ from those of industry professionals, and what implications do these differences have for the success and future of the technique? I know, catchy. So that's essentially how this project came to be. So let's kind of dive into it. Pretty early on, I decided I wanted it accessible and in a different way than I'd ever presented before. I'd found that people don't tend to read academic documents. So for the project, I decided I'd create a video essay titled Virtual Production, What's the Deal? It is available on my YouTube channel. There is a QR code later for you to be able to scan it and get to it. Let's try and bump those numbers. Okay, so I kind of broke it down into a couple of different sections. The first being industry perspectives. So I wanted to speak to the industry, find out what people in industry think virtual production is and what it means to them. So I took to LinkedIn, phone calls, emails, and a whole bunch of different conversations. I ended up landing on 4 professionals who were willing to play a bit of a bigger part in this research and partaking kind of formal interviews. So those people were Peter Kirkup, Solutions and Innovations Director from Disguise, Ross Gilbert, a CG Supervisor, David Stapp, who was at the time a virtual production stage operator, but is now Director of Virtual Production at Form Studios and host of Virtual Production Insider on YouTube, and our very own Rob Chandler, who will be speaking later today, Virtual Production Supervisor at More Than Wolf and founder of Starting Pixel. So having these professional voices on board, I was able to ask them very simply how would they define virtual production, and they all kind of had different reactions. So Peter explained that he highlighted that in the world that Disguise exists, as they specialize in getting pixels onto displays, they were very, very familiar with the term that is synonymous, so ICVFX. Ross explained it as a fancy way of swapping out the background while getting some foreground interaction, going on to describe a large half-dome of LEDs, explaining it as a way of bridging the gap between real and virtual. David defined it as a melting of 2 worlds, physical and virtual, to create a seamless illusion that tricks an audience, and Rob explained it as the use of converging technologies to help people do their jobs more efficiently. So yeah, kind of exactly what you'd expect. Each is along the same lines while remaining, unique and personal to each other and their, kind of bias from what they use. So they did all, without being prompted to, go on to explain that virtual production has a wider meaning than what they are used to. And the kind of key points I took away from this was that certain points would keep coming up between people, such as the idea that VP is a convergence of technologies, blends physical and virtual, and is about real-time visualization. It was pretty clear that they'd had their opinions formed by their own experiences using VP techniques. All these professionals knew that they were aware enough that this isn't the only way to do it. There are other ways to do it, as I discussed. So next up, I was looking into what the public think virtual production is, which again itself is a really complex question and one that again doesn't really have an answer. This was a fantastic topic to try and write an academic paper about. So I wanted to know what people from industry thought the audience thought virtual production was, and why they thought that way, rather than interviewing hundreds of people who had no idea what it was and trying to explain it all to them. I thought, let's look at the industry and what we think they think it is, which is kind of a roundabout way to do it, but it was very insightful. So the results of this were genuinely very intriguing to me. The answers the experts gave, it became pretty obvious that most of the industry thinks that audiences shouldn't really know what virtual production is. There's no reason for them to know what it is. There's no reason for them to be interested in production techniques. While those interested in film may watch behind the scenes content and learn that way, most audiences really only care if it looks good. Peter said you want them focused on the story. Ross said if you want it done, if it's done well, you don't see it. David alluded to it being kind of misunderstood and labelled as a gimmick by some people. And Rob added that it's only a small portion of people who would even care in the first place. I then went on to perform quite a lot of online research, reading forums, having kind of casual conversations, commenting on social media posts, private messaging people talking about virtual production. I turned to friends, family and the likes who I knew had nothing to do with virtual production, filmmaking or kind of anything similar, asking them what virtual production is. And through this casual research and the industry vague insights, I was able to progress and split the public into 3 admittedly pretty vague groups. So group 1 is the layman. They are the type who don't care. They have no idea or very simply don't care. They care far more about the final product and are not interested in production techniques and what goes into making something. Group 2, people with limited knowledge. These are generally people who have heard the buzzwords but still don't really know or understand what they mean. They know the term virtual production but not what it entails, leading them to often misuse it, sometimes vastly overestimating their expertise in the field. Such as in this example, wherein they attribute traditional VFX to virtual production, not understanding that there is actually a difference. And group 3, the enthusiast or hater. This is the kind of people who actually actively engage. They watch behind the scenes content, they read articles, often the most vocal online, typically correcting groups 1 and 2 when the term gets misused, or, you know, in this example, it was actually the person who was in this, who made this, who commented on it. And this group to me was the most interesting. They possess that baseline level of understanding of what it is because they, you know, actually engage. And because of this, to me, they were most relevant to this study. So what do they think virtual production is? Well, as we've discovered, they get their information from behind the scenes content and self-research. So by just looking at what's out there, we can kind of get a good idea. So it will come as no surprise to us all that this show was about to get mentioned. Disney's Gallery was the show that kind of pulled back the curtain for the first time on modern virtual production. It was the first instance of any behind the scenes properly showing what modern virtual production is. They had an entire episode dedicated to just the technology, overall doing a very, very good job, taking us along a journey all the way through The Lion King, all the way up to what eventually became the volume sets. You know, they're highlighting the key advancements like virtual cameras, LED panels, all the way up. But what I found with it, as the volume and LED panels was the new fancy tech that they had also spent a lot of money on, that was the main focus of the episode. So naturally, people kind of tied the 2 words volume and virtual production together. It would also set a bit of a trend following the release of it. All of these projects made use of virtual production in different ways, and all of them in their behind the scenes content only refer to virtual production as ICVFX, never explaining that there is actually a difference, at least in a couple of instances. So I also then looked at the impact the Mandalorian had when virtual production, so it was released in May 2020, the behind the scenes episode. You can see the point down there where search results for virtual production kind of shot up. So the impact of the Mandalorian and its behind the scenes episode kind of can't be understated, and it kind of cemented that ICVFX and virtual production are one and the same to the public. Which again, you can see by searching very, very simple things like what is virtual production and just virtual production on images. So, and that's still the same to this day, and I honestly don't think it's going to change. So more than 90% of the search results that you find are plain and simple LED walls and ICVFX workflows. So even the word volume became synonymous with virtual production, which is quite incredible in my opinion. So the next section was kind of understanding that reaction. You know, we had a solid understanding of what the public are kind of naturally going to think virtual production is, and with the groups defined, we can investigate how the public view the use of virtual production. So I went back to the industry experts and I asked, what do they think audiences view virtual production favourably? Pierre explained that he feels virtual production has been on a hype curve. Specifically, he mentioned Gartner's hype cycle, and how he feels that virtual production has been gaining more and more momentum. Ross said it should just be another tool in the toolbox. David mentioned that virtual production is in a bit of a grey area, noting that it has not always been used appropriately. Rob stuck with his original thoughts and said that they will only care if it's newsworthy or being reported. And once again, their answers stirred up more questions for me. The kind of hesitance and lack of confidence in a lot of their answers to say that yes, audiences like the use of virtual production was quite interesting to me. But when you look at social media and forums, it kind of becomes immediately obvious why that's the case. Here's a kind of selection of a couple of comments that I found. I spent a lot of time on Breda and Twitter, which is not a very fun spot to be in. So reading a lot of these comments that are put up on these sorts of sites, there is so much to unpack. Honestly, there is way too much. Generally, they verged on negative, often very nitpicky. These sorts of comments are everywhere. Some seem to understand it more than others, mentioning that when it's used in appropriate situations or conditions, so on and so forth. Yeah, you could sit for hours reading these sorts of things, try to answer them, understand them, but there's just simply too much, especially if you want to answer everyone's sort of varying opinions. So, when I spoke to industry professionals about how reading these kind of comments made them feel, they all pretty much agreed that it makes them think that we aren't doing our jobs very well. That they've made similar comments, that it makes them want to figure out why people are saying these sorts of things. David pointed out he's made some of these comments and said it's all trial and error at this point, so it's our responsibility to tell people when virtual production doesn't fit in a situation. Peter mentioned how it makes him wonder why people say these things. Was it the production? Was it the technology? Was it a creative choice? And how he wants to kind of analyse that and understand it. Ross mentioned how it's good that these types of comments can exist, and how you can totally see how people think these ways, recounting how, having worked with the same tech, he often feels the same. And Rob summed up pretty bluntly that we're not doing our job good enough. So instead, I focused on the effect that these kind of comments have on the industry. You know, what is our reaction to it? And in recent years, the industry as a whole has been following a kind of slightly worrying trend that I believe may stem from these sorts of comments. The worrying trend is, bizarrely enough, marketing productions as if they do not make use of VFX and virtual production. So if we look at some of the biggest examples are Top Gun Maverick, John Wick, Ford versus Ferrari, and Barbie. All these productions made use of CGI, VFX, and marketed themselves as having no CGI or being filmed practically. It's my belief that productions decide to do this purely as a marketing choice, to get people in seats to watch their films, and after seeing the kind of online backlash that virtual production, VFX, and CGI in general get. And unfortunately it worked. People were convinced that all of the jets in Top Gun are real, Barbie Land existed, and when in reality that was just not true. So now the audiences and studios are kind of caught in a loop. Audience wants less CGI, productions realise that's not possible, so they use CGI. They say they didn't. Audiences say, yes, that's it, we want less CGI. And then they're caught in that unfortunate kind of loop. So, it's now at the point where behind the scenes footage is attempting to hide the use of CGI, which was the case with Barbie. There was an entire 45-minute behind the scenes documentary where they were keying out blue screen and adding in practical sets. And when questioned on this, kind of all the professionals agreed that it was just a marketing choice. It's a trend. And when asked if it's fair on the VFX and VP teams that worked on this project, they all replied with a resounding no. It's not fair on the individuals, the teams, the companies, or the industry as a whole. And I think my favourite fact about all of that is that Top Gun Maverick, the practical film, was up for an Academy Award in visual effects. So, looking into the future, going all the way back to our comments, we can kind of map them out based on excitement to see if our hypothesis of it being on a hype cycle was correct. This comment was back from 2019, which says, if The Mandalorian was any indication, the virtual set is near indistinguishable from the CGI enhanced on-location shooting, which is great. So let's put it into this nice wee graph here. So it fits in, high level of excitement, kind of close to the beginning of when the public were aware of virtual production. Let's move on to the next one. This comment's from 2024, and it says, a bit insane that in just 5 years, we've gone from The Mandalorian looks so impressive because it used this revolutionary new form of projection called the volume to, don't worry, we didn't use any of that volume garbage on this one. That one fits right about here. This next comment is from a lot later in 2024. We can see people are once again starting to realize that it has its uses, and not everyone has experience with it yet, or it just wasn't used correctly. And that fits probably about there. Now I know that these are 3 very specific examples, but if you go back and look along these kind of time frames, a lot of the comments are very, very similar. So if we add a very quick line through it, you might recognize that that is exactly a Gartner hype cycle. So interestingly enough, it's also something called the Dunning-Kruger effect, which I'm sure many of us will be aware of, but it's essentially when people believe they are an industry expert in something before they realize, oh, I actually know nothing, and fall into the valley of despair. So we all remember back in 2019 and 2020 how common it would be to see people claiming that they knew lots about virtual production, when in fact they knew the buzzword, but not what it meant. And that effect caused a lot of confusion. Everyone developed their own unique understanding of what virtual production is, and that's why to this day we still don't have detailed definitions of what virtual production is or when it should and can be used. So, heading back to the hype cycle very quickly, based off the research, I place us somewhere on the slope of enlightenment. Personally, I believe closer to the bottom than the top, but in recent months, to be honest, it's placed us a bit higher up. We're currently in that space where everyone is still learning, testing and understanding what we can do and what we can get with it. So when I asked the professionals about their thoughts on the future of virtual production, I got a very wide array of answers, all of which I agreed with. Peter spoke of the technological advancements and the shift to bespoke and adaptable stages, which I think is something that we've all seen with permanent LED walls kind of being a thing of the past. Ross spoke about pre-visualization and immersive events. David mentioned efficiency and how stress the educational side, how we should work together for kids in schools who don't even know that they want to work in this industry yet. And Rob spoke of it becoming a simple choice for productions, just another tool in our tool belt. So my last stop was to try and define virtual production, which is once again a kind of impossible task, but I wanted to put my foot to it. Heading back to my very original question, what is virtual production? Through research and personal experience, I've concluded that virtual production is ultimately a very, very broad term, but at its core is 2 things. First off, it is a convergence of technologies, specifically technologies that, when combined, offer real-time visualization, a real-time visualization method for filmmaking, or just on-set previews. And secondly, perhaps unintentionally, it's a workflow designed to aid both production and post-production by heavily intensifying the pre-production. You can see from these diagrams that when compared to traditional filmmaking workflows, virtual production workflows are more complex, collaborative, and iterative. They kind of erode that boundary between production phases. They allow teams to be more cohesive and allow all members to make use of these pre-visualization tools that are on offer. So, what are these converging technologies that keep being referred to? From my research, there are 3 broad types that exist in a sort of gradient table, where you can see each sharing aspects from other types, with there kind of being few hard boundaries between. The first one that I looked at, the first one we've looked at, I found, was virtual capture. This is a term that I don't believe existed before, but I believe is very appropriate. I define this as a real-time render of a simulated thing, with that thing being able to change. This type makes use mostly of real-time rendering, typically done in a game engine, and many different sorts of 3D tracking. So the next type was a live composite, and in my opinion this is the most misunderstood type. It involves a real thing alongside a real-time composited virtual component, with the tech involved being live keying, again real-time rendering for both cameras and performance. And the last one being ICVFX. This type, as we explored, is the most well-known and is argued as the best. It's a real thing in front of some sort of display with the overarching goal of capturing everything in camera, removing compositing, typically with real-time rendered content that updates to match the real-time position of the camera. It expands set, costume, freedom, opening up blues, greens, and allowing for see-through or highly reflective materials. So let's see if we can add some different things into this table and see if it kind of holds up. So we've got virtual location scouting, we've got virtual camera rigs. Both of these are something being simulated in a virtual world. And you can even go as simple as just having a virtual world window on a comfort monitor for actors to be able to see what the final piece is going to be. My last addition would be in-camera green screening, which is more broadcast related. You could even go as far as to say things like weather reports fall under that as well. Of course, I would like to point out I haven't thought of everything, and where I've placed things may be different for you. But again, the beauty of this is that it fits somewhere. Regardless of where you put it, it falls under this same category. So, quickly head back to our hype cycle and where we are. How can we speed up getting up the slope of enlightenment? Well, we need to educate people. Create educational content for people to consume, communities like Starting Pixel and VP Gathering for people to talk, create charts, graphs for people to reference. There's still a massive lack of strictly academic papers on most things to do with virtual production. And for me, this project was my first kind of contribution towards that. The more time passes, the more we'll slowly climb up that slope, but it's up to us, the industry, to climb it and lead the way for audiences to be able to understand our industry. So after all of that, I finally sent my mum all of my research. I sent her my video essay, I sent her a 5,000 word report, and I got this text back from her where she asked me to remove some people in the background of a photo, which is not what I did. So I think we've got a little bit more work to do. But yeah, thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Rhys. That was absolutely fantastic.